when a raging wildfire tore through the forests of Los Angeles. One man braved the inferno to rescue stranded families and forgotten souls. But as Keanu Reeves pushed through the choking smoke and searing heat, tiny, trembling puppy grabbed his attention, leading him deeper into the blazing woods. What he found next, a mother dog bound to a tree, her desperate eyes pleading for help, set off a chain of events that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her pup. This is a story of survival, sacrifice, and the extraordinary lengths one man and two brave dogs would go to for each other. In early January 2025, a catastrophic wildfire erupted in the forests surrounding Los Angeles, marking one of the city's worst natural disasters in history. Fueled by the relentless Santa Ana winds, the fire spread at an unimaginable speed, devouring hundreds of acres within hours. Firefighters and police rushed to evacuate residents, but the rugged terrain and rapidly advancing flames left many areas completely isolated. Amid the chaos, Keanu Reeves volunteered with a local rescue team, ready to help anyone in need. Alongside his team, he was tasked with searching for those still trapped and guiding them to safety. Though not a professional rescuer, Keanu's calm determination quickly made him a natural leader among the group. That afternoon, as the fire surged toward an abandoned campsite, Keanu and a few team members ventured deep into the forest to ensure no one was left behind. The scene was harrowing: fallen trees, the sharp crackle of burning branches, and thick, suffocating smoke that turned daylight into an eerie twilight. Each breath was a struggle, but Keanu pressed forward, scanning every corner for signs of life. Suddenly, he heard it, a faint, trembling bark cutting through the chaos. He stopped in his tracks, straining to hear it again amidst the roaring wind and flames. The bark repeated, soft yet urgent, a desperate cry for help. Turning to his team, Keanu said, "You head north. I'll check this out." Pushing through a trail littered with ash and debris, Keanu followed the sound toward a small clearing. There, beside a fallen tree, he spotted a trembling puppy, its fur singed and its eyes wide with fear. Before Keanu could react, the pup darted toward him, gently tugging at his pant leg, as if pleading for him to follow. "Hold on, little one. I'll help," Keanu murmured, trying to reassure the pup, but it refused to stop, insistently leading him down a narrow path into the heart of the inferno. Trusting its urgency, Keanu followed, even as the flames crept closer, the heat pressing against his skin like a vice. The sight that greeted him tightened his chest. Ahead, tied tightly to a large tree, was a grown dog struggling against its restraints. His fur was matted with soot, and its eyes glistened with both fear and determination. The puppy, clearly its offspring, rushed forward, nuzzling its mother and barking loudly, as if urging Keanu to act quickly. Keanu immediately understood. These weren't just two dogs. They were mother and child. The adult dog, Blaze, though visibly exhausted, instinctively positioned herself between the flames and her pup, Spark, refusing to let the fire harm her little one. In that moment, Keanu felt the raw power of maternal love, stronger than even the consuming blaze around them. "It's okay. I'm getting you out of here," Keanu assured them, pulling a knife from his pocket to cut the ropes. The smoke was thick, stinging his eyes and throat as he worked quickly. Blaze, as if understanding his intentions, remained still, her gaze locked on Spark. The puppy stood firm, its tiny body trembling but its resolve unshaken, never straying from its mother's side. Finally, the ropes gave way. Blaze collapsed briefly before shakily rising, immediately leaning toward Spark to check if her pup was unharmed. Keanu knew they had no time to lose. The fire had closed in dangerously close, and every second counted. He scooped up Spark into his arms while Blaze followed closely, her every step a testament to her unwavering determination. As the three began their desperate escape, Keanu realized that the flames were only the beginning of their trials. What lay ahead would test their courage, intelligence, and the extraordinary bond that now united them. Blaze's labored breaths were audible over the crackling inferno as she followed Keanu, her weary steps mirroring his determination to get them all to safety. The forest around them was an ever-shifting maze of flames and smoke, each path more treacherous than the last. Keanu clutched Spark tightly to his chest, shielding the tiny pup from the worst of the heat. The trio moved cautiously, guided by Blaze's instincts. Her keen nose twitched with every step, searching for fresher air and a way out of the burning chaos. Keanu relied on her completely, trusting the maternal bond that had already saved Spark once. Ahead, the path narrowed sharply, flanked on either side by blazing underbrush. The heat was almost unbearable, and Keanu's lungs burned with every breath. He paused for a moment, leaning against a charred tree trunk to steady himself. Blaze stopped too, her amber eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed almost human. "I'm okay," Keanu murmured, more to reassure her than himself. "We're not stopping here." Blaze let out a low bark, almost as if she understood. She nudged his leg with her nose, urging him forward. They pressed on, weaving through the smoldering debris. Sparks rained down from above, lighting up the ash-darkened sky in bursts of fiery orange. Keanu could feel the strain in his muscles, the heat sapping his strength with every step. But just as doubt began to creep in, Blaze froze, her body tensed, ears swiveling sharply toward the left. A deep growl rumbled in her chest as she turned her head toward the sound of faint cries, human cries. Keanu's heart skipped a beat. "Someone's still out here," he whispered. Blaze barked sharply, as if to confirm his thought, and took off toward the sound. Keanu followed, his legs protesting with every stride. Spark, sensing the urgency, squirmed slightly in his arms but settled when Keanu whispered, "Hold tight, little one. We've got this." Through the thick smoke, the outline of a small wooden cabin came into view. The roof was partially collapsed, flames licking at the edges. Keanu could hear the cries more clearly now. A child's voice, high-pitched and terrified. "Help me, please." Keanu didn't hesitate. He set Spark down next to Blaze and knelt to their level. "Stay here," he said firmly, looking directly into Blaze's eyes. "I'll get them out." Blaze whined softly but didn't move. Spark pressed close to her side, watching Keanu with wide, worried eyes. Keanu darted toward the cabin, his movements quick but deliberate. He pushed the partially open door wider, the heat inside hitting him like a physical wall. The child's cries grew louder, guiding him toward a small corner of the room where a young boy was huddled, clutching a stuffed animal. "Hey, buddy," Keanu called out, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency. "I'm here to help. We're getting out of here." The boy's tear-streaked face lifted, and he nodded shakily. Keanu crossed the room in a few strides, scooping the child into his arms. The flames had spread dangerously close, and the ceiling groaned under the strain of the fire. As Keanu turned to leave, a fiery beam crashed down in front of him, blocking the exit. He shielded the boy with his body, his mind racing for a way out. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see. But then he heard it, a sharp bark from outside. "Blaze," Keanu muttered, a surge of hope igniting within him. Through a broken window, he saw Blaze pacing near the side of the cabin, her powerful jaws tugging at a loose section of wood. Keanu wasted no time. He adjusted his grip on the boy and kicked at the weakened wall, the combined force of his effort and Blaze's persistence creating an opening just big enough to squeeze through. Blaze stepped back as Keanu climbed out, the boy clinging to him tightly. Spark barked excitedly, circling them in a mix of relief and joy. Keanu knelt to set the boy down, his hands trembling from exhaustion. "Thank you," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. Keanu gave him a reassuring nod before turning back to Blaze and Spark. "We're not out of the woods yet," he said, picking up Spark and gesturing for Blaze to lead the way again. The fire showed no mercy, but neither did they. Blaze pressed on, her strength and resolve undiminished despite the grueling journey. Keanu followed her lead, the boy's small hand clutching his sleeve as they navigated through the burning forest. Each step felt like a victory against the inferno, their bond strengthening with every obstacle they overcame together. Keanu couldn't help but marvel at Blaze's courage and Spark's determination, their loyalty to each other shining brighter than the flames. The forest's relentless inferno roared like a living beast, its fiery tendrils clawing at the sky and swallowing every trace of calm. Keanu, Blaze, Spark, and the young boy pressed onward, their makeshift team driven by sheer determination and an unyielding will to survive. Every step was a calculated risk, every breath a battle against the suffocating smoke. Yet, in the midst of chaos, there was hope, a glimmer of light that refused to be extinguished. Blaze led the way, her powerful instincts guiding them through the maze of burning trees and collapsing debris. Spark, small but fearless, followed closely, his loyalty to both his mother and Keanu unwavering. The boy clung to Keanu's hand, his tiny grip a reminder of the stakes at hand. Keanu, though physically exhausted, drew strength from the courage of those around him, both human and animal. The path ahead was perilous. Fallen tree, his trunk still glowing with embers, blocked their way. Blaze paused, her ears perked as she assessed the obstacle. She barked once, a sharp, commanding sound that seemed to signal a plan. Keanu crouched down beside her, his hand resting gently on Spark's back. "I hear you, girl," Keanu said, his voice calm despite the urgency. "We'll figure this out." Blaze's keen eyes scanned the terrain, and she suddenly darted toward a narrow gap in the brush, her powerful frame forcing an opening through the debris. Keanu followed her lead, carefully guiding the boy and carrying Spark close to his chest. The heat pressed against them like a vice, but they pushed through, emerging into a small clearing just as a branch cracked and fell behind them, sealing the path they had come from. They paused briefly to catch their breath. Keanu knelt beside Blaze, pouring a small amount of water from his canteen into his hand. Blaze lapped it up eagerly, her gratitude evident in the soft wag of her tail. Spark nudged closer, his tiny nose sniffing at the droplets as Keanu offered him some as well. The boy watched silently, his wide eyes filled with awe at the bond between man and dog. "Not much farther now," Keanu murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Blaze barked softly, as if agreeing, and rose to her feet, ready to continue. "But before we delve deeper into this extraordinary journey, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced that unspoken connection with an animal, the kind that defies logic and speaks straight to your heart, hit that like button. This story is proof that sometimes miracles happen in the most unexpected ways. As they pressed on, a faint noise reached Keanu's ears, a distant, rhythmic thumping. He paused, tilting his head to listen. It grew louder, unmistakable now, the sound of helicopter blades slicing through the air. Rescue was near. Blaze's ears perked up, and she barked loudly, as if trying to guide the aircraft toward them. Keanu felt a surge of relief but knew they weren't out of danger yet. The clearing they stood in offered no real protection, and the fire continued to advance. They needed to find higher ground to make themselves visible. "This way," Keanu said, gesturing toward a rocky incline that rose above the treeline. He lifted the boy onto his back, securing him with a reassuring pat. "Hold tight, buddy." Blaze and Spark moved ahead, their determination unyielding despite their exhaustion. The climb was steep, and the heat seemed to intensify with every step. Keanu's legs burned with effort, but he refused to stop, driven by the hope of safety just within reach. Finally, they reached the summit. From their vantage point, Keanu could see the rescue helicopter hovering nearby, its searchlight cutting through the thick smoke. He waved his arms frantically, shouting to get their attention. Blaze joined in, her powerful bark echoing across the ridge. Spark, not to be outdone, yipped with all the strength his small frame could muster. The helicopter turned toward them, its spotlight fixing on their location. A wave of relief washed over Keanu as the aircraft descended. A rescue team preparing to deploy. He knelt beside Blaze and Spark, his hands resting on their soot-covered fur. "We did it," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "We made it." As the rescue team approached, the boy clung tightly to Keanu, his trust unwavering. Blaze stood tall, her head held high, while Spark nuzzled against her side. Together, they had faced the fire and emerged stronger, a testament to the power of courage, love, and the bonds that unite us. But this wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of extraordinary connection, one that would live on as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can be found. The helicopter's spotlight cut through the smoky haze, guiding the rescue team closer. Relief filled the air, but the danger was far from over. The fire roared with renewed ferocity, flames leaping across the forest floor, threatening to engulf the group. Blaze barked urgently, her sharp, commanding voice cutting through the chaos. She knew the danger was closing in. Keanu looked at Blaze and Spark, their soot-covered faces mirroring his determination. "We're almost there," he said, his voice firm but thick with exhaustion. "Just a little more." The rescue team signaled for them to move toward a safer clearing for pickup. Keanu lifted the boy onto his back once more, his legs burning as he climbed down the rocky slope. Blaze led the way, her keen instincts searching for the safest path. Spark stayed close to her side, his tiny frame darting forward and back as if eager to help. But then it happened, a fiery branch snapped from above, crashing to the ground directly in their path. The flames spread quickly, cutting them off. Blaze stopped abruptly, her body tensing, the fire's glow reflected in her amber eyes as she turned to Spark, letting out a sharp bark. The message was clear: stay back. Keanu froze, his heart pounding as he realized what was about to happen. "No, Blaze, don't," he shouted, his voice breaking. But Blaze didn't hesitate. With a surge of strength, she lunged forward, shoving Spark out of harm's way just as the fire surged closer. The flames licked at Blaze's side as she yelped in pain, her body shielding Spark from the worst of the heat. Keanu watched in horror, helpless as Blaze collapsed briefly, her legs buckling under her. The puppy scrambled to her side, letting out desperate cries, nuzzling his mother as if urging her to move. "Blaze!" Keanu dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. He crawled toward her, his arms trembling as he scooped Spark into one arm and reached for Blaze with the other. She was still alive but badly injured. Her breathing labored and her fur singed from the flames. Keanu's voice broke as he cradled her head. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, his tears falling onto her ashen coat. "You're too strong to give up now. We need you." Blaze's eyes met his, filled with both pain and resolve. She let out a low whimper, nuzzling Spark weakly as if reassuring her pup that everything would be okay. Spark licked her face frantically, his tiny whines echoing Keanu's anguish. The flames crept closer, but Keanu refused to leave her behind. With a surge of adrenaline, he lifted Blaze into his arms despite the weight, clutching Spark tightly against his chest. "We're getting out of here together," he said through gritted teeth, his voice a mix of determination and desperation. Blaze, though weak, seemed to understand. She didn't struggle but rested against him, her head pressed against Spark's small body. Keanu stumbled forward, every step a fight against the encroaching fire. The boy clung to his back, his small voice trembling. "Is she going to be okay?" Keanu didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could do was keep moving, his tears mixing with the sweat and soot on his face. Blaze's sacrifice weighed heavy on his heart, but her unwavering love for Spark fueled his determination to save them both. As they reached the clearing, the rescue team descended, rushing toward them with stretchers and water. Keanu collapsed onto his knees, gently laying Blaze on the ground, Medics surrounded them, working quickly to treat her burns. Spark refused to leave her side, his tiny body trembling but steadfast as he pressed against his mother. Keanu turned away briefly, wiping his eyes with a soot-covered hand. His chest heaved with emotion as the realization of what had just happened sank in. He had witnessed something extraordinary, a mother's love so fierce it defied even the consuming flames. Blaze let out a faint whimper, her tail wagging weakly as if to say she was still fighting. Spark responded with a soft bark, his loyalty and love mirroring hers. Keanu knelt beside them again, his hand resting on Blaze's head. "You're incredible," he whispered. "Both of you." The helicopter roared overhead, its blades stirring the smoky air as the team prepared for evacuation. Keanu carefully carried Blaze onto the stretcher, Spark climbing on to stay by her side. As the rescue team lifted them into the aircraft, Keanu sat back, his body heavy with exhaustion but his heart filled with awe. Looking down at Blaze and Spark, he thought of all they had endured together. The fire had tested them in unimaginable ways, but it had also revealed the unbreakable bonds of love, courage, and sacrifice. And as the helicopter rose into the sky, Keanu knew this was a story he would carry with him forever. A story of survival and the sacred bond between a mother and her child. The helicopter soared above the blazing forest, carrying its precious cargo away from the inferno. Inside, the medics worked quickly to tend to Blaze's injuries. The mother dog lay still, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Spark refused to leave her side, his tiny frame pressed close to her, as if his presence alone could keep her strong. Keanu sat nearby, his hands clasped tightly together, his face etched with worry and exhaustion. The boy, now wrapped in a warm blanket, glanced up at Keanu with wide, curious eyes. "She's going to be okay, right?" he asked softly, his voice trembling with both fear and hope. Keanu managed a small nod, though his heart was heavy. "She's a fighter," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "She's stronger than any of us." The helicopter touched down at an emergency relief station on the outskirts of the disaster zone. Paramedics rushed forward to help unload the passengers. Keanu carried Blaze carefully, cradling her as though she might break, while Spark trotted alongside, his tiny paws barely keeping up. The boy was led away by a rescue worker, his tearful thanks lingering in Keanu's mind as he focused entirely on Blaze. Inside the makeshift veterinary tent, a team of animal medics worked tirelessly to stabilize Blaze. Keanu stayed just outside, pacing back and forth, his hands running through his soot-streaked hair. Spark sat by the entrance, his gaze fixed on the tent flap as though willing his mother to emerge unscathed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the vet stepped out. The woman's face was kind but serious, her expression softening as she saw the anxious dog and man waiting. "She's stable," she said gently. "The burns are serious, but with time and care, she'll recover. She's an extraordinary dog." Keanu let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Can I see her?" The vet nodded and led him inside. Blaze lay on a soft mat, her body bandaged, her eyes half open but alert. When she saw Keanu and Spark, her tail thumped weakly against the ground. Spark immediately climbed onto the mat, nuzzling into her side, his tiny barks a mixture of relief and encouragement. Keanu knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her head. "You scared us out there," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "But you saved him. You saved all of us." Blaze let out a low whine, her gaze shifting between Keanu and Spark as though she understood every word. Keanu stayed with her for hours, refusing to leave her side. The bond they had forged in the heart of the fire had become something deeper, something unshakable. They weren't just a man and two dogs, they were family now. As dawn broke over the relief station, the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the fiery chaos of the night before. Keanu stepped outside the tent, Spark at his heels, to take in the fresh morning air. The forest fire had left scars on the land, but the sight of rescue teams working tirelessly to rebuild brought a sense of hope. Spark yipped softly, drawing Keanu's attention back to the tent. He turned to see Blaze standing unsteadily at the entrance, her bandaged frame supported by the vet. Her eyes locked onto Keanu, and despite her obvious pain, her tail wagged slowly but surely. "You're something else," Keanu murmured, walking back to her and gently scratching behind her ears. "Ready to go home, girl?" Blaze leaned into his touch, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. Spark circled her excitedly, barking as though declaring the beginning of a new chapter for their little family. Keanu smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the fire they had escaped. Together, the three of them stepped forward, leaving the chaos behind. Their journey had been one of survival and sacrifice, but it was also a testament to the unbreakable bonds forged in the face of unimaginable odds. For Keanu, Blaze, and Spark, the flames had not just tested their strength, they had united them forever. Weeks passed since the wildfire, and life slowly began to settle into a new normal. Keanu had brought Blaze and Spark home, ensuring they had the care and comfort they deserved after their harrowing ordeal. Blaze, though still recovering, had regained much of her strength, her bandaged wounds a testament to her bravery. Spark remained her shadow, never venturing far from his mother's side, his playful energy a reminder of how resilient they both were. Keanu's house, nestled on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, became a sanctuary for the little family. Blaze had claimed a spot by the window, where she could watch the world outside, while Spark darted around the house with uncontainable energy. The once silent rooms were now filled with the soft thump of tails wagging and the occasional excited bark. One crisp morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, Keanu sat on the floor with a cup of coffee in hand, watching Spark tug playfully at Blaze's tail. A faint smile played on his lips as Blaze indulged her pup with a gentle nuzzle, her patience and love for him unwavering. The bond between mother and child had only deepened, a sacred connection that had carried them through the flames and into this new chapter of life. The doorbell rang, breaking the quiet moment. Keanu rose to answer it, finding a young reporter standing on his doorstep. She held a notebook and recorder, her expression a mix of awe and determination. "Mr. Reeves," she began, "I've been following the story of the wildfire rescues, and I heard about what you did for the boy, for Blaze and Spark. People are calling it a miracle. I'd love to share your story." Keanu hesitated, his gaze shifting back to the living room where Blaze and Spark were now sprawled out together. Picture of peace. He wasn't one for the spotlight, but this wasn't just his story, it was theirs. "I'll share," he said finally, his voice steady. "But this is about them more than me. Blaze, Spark, they're the real heroes." Over the next few days, Keanu worked with the reporter to recount the events of that fateful night. The story, once published, spread quickly, touching hearts far and wide. Blaze and Spark became symbols of resilience and unconditional love, their journey inspiring countless people to reflect on the strength found in even the smallest of bonds. Letters poured in, some from families who had survived similar disasters, others from animal lovers who saw their own pets in Blaze and Spark. Donations to local animal rescue organizations skyrocketed, with many citing Blaze's courage as their reason for giving. Keanu used the opportunity to advocate for both wildfire recovery efforts and the importance of protecting vulnerable animals in times of crisis. One afternoon, as Keanu read through a particularly touching letter from a child who said Blaze and Spark inspired her to adopt a rescue dog, he looked over at his two companions. Blaze was lounging by the fireplace, her eyes half closed, while Spark curled up against her, his tiny body rising and falling with each peaceful breath. "You two don't even realize the difference you've made," Keanu said softly, his voice filled with affection. Blaze opened one eye, her tail wagging lazily, as if to say she didn't need to know being together was enough. As the days turned into months, Keanu, Blaze and Spark built a life filled with quiet joy and unwavering companionship. The fire had tested them in every way imaginable. But it had also given them something extraordinary: each other. Their story, though born in tragedy, had become a beacon of hope, reminding everyone who heard it that even in the darkest moments, love and courage could light the way forward. And as Keanu watched Blaze and Spark drift into a peaceful sleep that evening, he knew that they hadn't just survived, they had thrived. Together, the days following the wildfire were a blur of recovery and uncertainty. Though the immediate danger had passed for Keanu, Blaze, and Spark, the lingering effects of the disaster were far from over. The fire continued to burn in other areas, and the air carried the faint scent of smoke, a grim reminder of the devastation that had engulfed the forest and its inhabitants. Keanu spent his time ensuring Blaze and Spark were cared for, their safety his top priority. Blaze had begun to regain her strength, her wounds healing slowly but steadily under Keanu's watchful eye. Spark, ever the energetic pup, had a way of lifting their spirits even during the darkest moments. His playful antics brought a rare sense of normalcy to their otherwise fragile reality. One afternoon, Keanu received a call from a friend who volunteered with wildlife rescue efforts. The fire had displaced countless animals, and many were in desperate need of help. Knowing what Blaze and Spark had endured, Keanu couldn't ignore the call to action. He packed supplies, loaded Blaze and Spark into his truck, and drove toward one of the temporary animal shelters set up on the outskirts of the affected area. The shelter was a bustling hub of activity, with volunteers tending to injured animals and setting up enclosures for those rescued from the flames. The scene was chaotic but filled with purpose, a stark contrast to the destruction they had all witnessed. Blaze and Spark immediately drew attention as they entered the shelter. Blaze, though bandaged, carried herself with quiet strength, while Spark pranced beside her, his tail wagging furiously. The sight of the two dogs, survivors of the very fire that had displaced so many, brought smiles to weary faces. Keanu spoke with the shelter coordinator, offering to assist in any way he could. Before long, he found himself working alongside the volunteers, helping to distribute supplies and comfort frightened animals. Blaze and Spark, seemingly understanding the gravity of the situation, played their part as well. Blaze's calm demeanor soothed the more anxious animals, while Spark's boundless energy encouraged them to engage and explore their surroundings. As the day went on, Keanu found himself in a quiet corner of the shelter, tending to a litter of kittens that had been found near the fire's edge. The tiny creatures, barely old enough to walk, mewed softly as he gently fed them from a bottle. Blaze lay nearby, her watchful eyes never leaving Keanu's hands, while Spark nosed curiously at the kittens, his puppy-like curiosity winning them over. One of the volunteers approached Keanu, her face a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. "I've never seen animals respond like this," she said, gesturing toward Blaze and Spark. "It's like they know exactly what these other animals have been through." Keanu glanced at Blaze, her quiet strength radiating even in her injured state. "They do," he said simply. "They've been there." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Keanu prepared to head home. The shelter was calmer now, the animals settling into their temporary refuge. As he loaded Blaze and Spark back into the truck, he couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose. The fire had taken so much, but it had also revealed the resilience of those who had faced it head-on. Driving back through the quiet streets, Keanu glanced in the rearview mirror. Blaze lay contentedly in the back seat, her head resting against Spark, who was snuggled close to her side. The sight filled him with a sense of peace, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was always the possibility of healing and hope. As they pulled into the driveway, Keanu parked the truck and sat in the stillness for a moment. The stars were just beginning to appear, their light a quiet promise that the darkness would never last forever. He turned to Blaze and Spark, their bond unbroken and stronger than ever. Ready for whatever comes next? He asked softly. Blaze lifted her head, her tail thumping against the seat, while Spark let out a soft bark, as if to say they were ready for anything, as long as they were together. Keanu smiled, stepping out of the truck with the unshakable feeling that, no matter what lay ahead, they had already survived the worst and emerged stronger for it. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of survival, courage, and the unbreakable bond between Blaze, Spark, and Keanu. What did you think of their story? If you were moved by their resilience, comment 2 below to let me know you loved it. If you think it could have been better, don't hesitate to share your thoughts with a 7. Your feedback helps me grow and bring you even better stories. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Tapestry of World for more heartwarming tales and extraordinary adventures. Together, let's keep weaving the stories that connect us all. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being part of this journey.